Hey, what's going on, everybody? Andrew here, back for our build review show. It is Friday, August 23rd of 2024, and should be a solid show today. We didn't have a show yesterday because I was out sick, so we do have a little bit of a backlog of people to get to today. So we have 4 people sign up for the build review show within the last 2 days. Looking forward to jumping in and seeing what we can see, learning what we can learn from reviewing these users' builds. If anybody else wants to get their build reviewed on a future show, best thing you can do is drop your DK username in the office hours channel in our Discord server. We do this show Monday through Friday, and I can always add you to the queue for Monday here. So it should be a good show. Let's jump right in. First person up is going to be CC from the Discord. We're going to pull up their builds from Wednesday here, and let's go and look at their early MLB slate. So I think that, this seems like a pretty solid one to look over. So as always, going to start in the contest tab and see what they're playing. So playing a dime time, playing a $1 single entry, solid split here. Now let's jump into one of these and see how it's looking. So where I would like to start is the one where they have more entries. So I'm going to go and look at the dime time. Hop over to users. So it looks like this is Mr. Chris here. Going to set entries equal to 20, sort by sim ROI. So Chris is grading out really well in this contest, right? 18. The highest we see is 27, but by the time we get to like the 5th person or 6th person, we're down at like 20%. So Chris is just about like right at the top 10 here. So this is really, really good, right? Very, very encouraging results. Taking a peek here. Average salary looks fine. Uniqueness looks fine. Sim average score looks good. So, this is what you would expect to see, right? Let's see if we can dig a little bit deeper and figure out what Chris can do to keep improving his sets, right? But this is very, very strong and encouraging results right out of the gate. So I'm going to jump into this 20 max build and see what's going on over here. Okay, so using Saber Score here. Let's go back to where we were. Okay, so projection filter is good here. One thing is that I'll mention here, it's a little aggressive, right? Filtering out like 40% of their lineups here. I usually recommend being a little less aggressive, more in like the 10 to 20% range. But if you're comfortable with filtering out such a high percentage, that's okay. One thing I think you can do here, add in a aggregate metric, right? Just to help you kind of analyze your set of 20 better. So, hey, when I turn this off, my average projection goes down to 92.2, right? But then when I turn that filter on, I think it was at like 95.5, right? So you can see the impact that the filter you're setting is having by having this data point here. And then this also helps when you're using a high min unique, right? Like you're using min uniques of 6 here. This will also be good for figuring out, hey, is 5 a better number? Is 6 a better number? You could see the impact that it's having on that average projection across your set. So just something good to reference. Highly recommend having it along with the filter, right? So filter is good. Add in this aggregate metric to help you kind of get a better sense of where you're at with your changes. Taking a look at exposures. No individual exposures in the all tab, in the batters tab. Small change here in the pitchers tab. One adjustment to Justin Verlander. I think that's fine. It's okay to be opinionated. I like the way you did it, right? Setting the mini leagues first, coming here, making a couple fine-tuned adjustments. I can definitely see where that's coming from, right? Like his ownership's like 17%. You see he has a high pool exposure here of like 36%. You're like, hey, I want to make sure I'm getting to some of him because he's just grading out so well across the pool. So you set this small minimum exposure saying, hey, I want to like basically at least match exposure on him across the pool. And then nothing else in the team stacks or stack exposure. So Chris, man, I think that this is really, really solid. I think you're doing a lot of the right things. Keep grinding away. The contests that you're entering are going to increase over time as you continue to grow your bankroll. Adding that aggregate metric is the only thing I would change here, give you a better sense of what unique number you should kind of settle on. But other than that, really solid stuff. And like what I'm seeing, sometimes the less I have to talk about means that, hey, you're doing a pretty good job. And there's not too much I would change here. So good stuff. All right. Let's keep it rolling here. Next person we are going to pull up is Raf LP. Raf is a frequent flyer on the show, but hey, I mean, the show is available to everybody. And if there are spots open, we can go over anybody's set as many times as they want. So let's see what I believe Raf had like called out a specific slate. So he said 821 main slate, MME build, late swap. So let's go. We're on 821. Let's go over to the main. And then we said MME swap. So this is the one that we want to look at here. So Raf, really consistent. Let me get Saberson pulled up here. Starting in the contest tab, always very consistent with his contest selection. Very good example of good contest selection. Has like this hard cap right now of like $80. And you'll see that, there are going to be some contests where he doesn't max them out, right? Mini max, 150 max, and there's 22 because it makes the most sense. So the important thing here, right? Entering some of these other good contests first, and then the mini max, which has like a lower overall sim ROI, entering that one kind of last with whatever bankroll is left over. So just a good example there. But let's jump into this MME swap build. Okay, mini max. Switch it back to ROI. Okay, so a couple things here, right? This is a good example of how to set up your swaps. I think that this is important. So he has 5 original builds, right? And then he has 5 swaps. So what he's doing is saying, hey, I'm building my quarter jukebox and my solo shot in this one build here. Well, then what he's doing is like after the slate starts, you don't even have to wait till you're ready to late swap. You can go and set up all these swap builds as soon as the slate starts. So you click late swap, you go in here, you select the contest you want, and then you click late swap, and then that will open up a late swap build. And then you can rename it, you can get it ready, whatever you want to do on like a, build by build basis. So if you're spreading it out, this is a totally good way to do it. Now, let's see. Raf said, I wanted to start on the regular and then check the swap to see if anything was done wrong or right. Okay, so let's go to MME. And let's let this load. Okay, so in the MME build, couple filters, right? We see ownership filter, See an ROI filter. That looks fine. Min uniques of 7, 22 lineups. Increasing min salary here to 49.5. Has a rule for only one pitcher from a game here. I'm neutral on it. I think it's fine. Okay. So have a pretty good sense of what's going on here in this MME build. Now let's jump over to the MME swap. Okay, so couple notes. So one thing that you're going to notice very often in swaps is that you usually cannot reach the same number of min uniques. It's usually going to be a little bit lower, right? That's okay. So, he got to 7 min uniques in the MME build. Here, he got to 6. I would actually probably, I don't know if it's the min uniques that's causing this to be 17 or if just not enough swaps were achieved. Okay, so you can see that the my lineups here is 17, right? But the number of lineups in the settings is 22. So basically what happened is that the build timed out before all the lineups were swapped. So this usually happens when there are kind of too many restrictions, or the restrictions are like tight and the builder can't get to all the swap combos. What I would recommend is redoing the late swap if you have time, and trying to get this my lineups to at least be the number of lineups. And I would do 2 things to achieve that. Number 1 is I would lower the swaps per lineup to be less. And I would do that first. So let's say that, it looks like there was like a 5:10 p.m. game, and then there was a break, and then it's like a 6:40 and a 7:10 Pacific time, right? So what I would do is I would lower swaps per lineup. If we're in the late window, maybe I lower it from 32 to, 15 or something like that, right? That's the first thing I would do, is lower this number. Now, I probably wouldn't go less than 10. So, probably like my floor is probably 10 here. Let's say that you do that and it's still not swapping all the lineups. Then what I would do is I would drop the minimum salary here. So 49.5 can be a little restrictive. You could try 49,000, 48,000, back to like even the sim default, which I think it's 48,000 for this size of a slate here. I would do those 2 things. So drop swaps per lineup, drop minimum salary. Those are going to be your first go-tos here. Second go-tos would be to turn off any rules or minimax exposures or things like that. So I would, like you could come in here, right? And you see like there are some max exposures in this all tab because there is the reset icon is visible. So you can just come in here and reset this and turn those off and then click apply. You could turn off any rules and then rerun your late swap, and that will also help as well. So there's a couple things you could do to alleviate issues with not all your swaps being met, and those are the big ones, right? Swaps per lineup, minimum salary, rules, filters, minimax exposures, turning them off kind of one by one, or increasing the threshold to give the builder a little bit more flexibility are going to be the biggest things that you can do to help that problem. But other than that, not seeing a lot wrong. One important note, right? Good to note is that he is using ROI in his late swaps. And then we saw that he was using risk adjusted ROI in his pre-build. That is the way that I definitely recommend using this here. Want to account for more risk and diversification up front. And then as the games play out, as lineups are locking, as there's only a few spots left in your lineup, want to try and optimize for the highest cashing potential or return on investment at that point. So like what I'm seeing there. Quick note before we move on, asking if we'll be doing this for NFL season. Yeah, absolutely. We will definitely roll this show into NFL, and I'll be happy to review users' builds on Mondays for sure. Probably roll into Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I can definitely see that happening here. But yeah, we'll be doing this show for NFL season. All right, good stuff so far. Let's keep it rolling. So that was for Wednesday. And we got our next person here, Jimmy, and we are going to look at Jimmy's stuff for yesterday, Thursday, the 22nd. So I'm going to get Jimmy up. All right, loading now. And starting contest tab as always. All right, so playing 2 contests, 20 max each. I would recommend taking a little bit of this solo shot action and getting some single entry and 3 max, the $1 single, the $1 3 max, $3 single. I think that those will be good starts here. And then those contests alone give you like $7 in single entry 3 max action, which is kind of right where you want to be at this dollar value, playing like $25 a day. So get some action in those 3 contests would be my first recommendation. But either way, let's jump into this contest here and see how you grade it out. Okay, gonna set a filter for 20 lineups, sort by sim ROI. This is great stuff here. So Jimmy here, 3rd highest sim ROI. Top is 28%, and he's just about at 26%. So very, very high sim ROI here, and pretty good stuff, right? So average salary looks good. 1 average dupe. It is a 5-game slate, so it's a little bit smaller, but still 15 out of 20 unique lineups here, and a pretty solid sim average score. I'm a little curious if he had just like 1 lineup duped a bunch, because 15 out of 20 were unique, and like 1 lineup must have been just like heavily duplicated to get to average dupes of 1. Okay, 1 lineup duped 3 times. 1 lineup duped 4. One lineup duped 2. It seems like these Philly stacks own 174. It seems a little random that these lineups were duplicated, because you see like this lineup here that's unique, that's like a 219% sum ownership, and then this other lineup with 174% sum ownership with 4 dupes, and every single player here except for Bryce Harper is single digit player ownership. So it seems a little bit random. I wouldn't read into it too much. And this lineup ends up being like neutral sim ROI. Wonder what the one with 3 had. This one was like slightly positive. And then this one didn't even use all of the salary either. Wow, it's actually like super interesting. It's like a 7, 8, 9 stack, and you're still duplicated. So strange. All right. Well, I'm chalking this up to pretty hard to predict that, you're going to be duplicated 3 times with 2% Michael Taylor, 5% Yasmani Grandal in this lineup. So I think that's pretty tough to avoid. I was going to try and see if there was something with like some super high sum ownership where you just like, played like a incredibly high owned lineup and maybe we could get away from it, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. So either way, really, really solid output so far from what we're seeing here. And then let's go and look. So did 2 separate builds. So let's go look at build 1 for the solo shot. Okay, let's open up the lineup pane. All right. Using a filter here, ROI greater than 0. Using it for both contests here, or he says solo mine. So it must be a self sim. Okay. Yeah. So he's using a self sim for both of these. I think that's totally cool. So one thing I'll say, this is a little bit tough because Jimmy's grading out so well here. This is going to be one of those where like, hey, I don't have a ton to say, where, he's grading out so well that like, hey, you're doing a lot of the right stuff. Like, keep it up. There's a little bit of a debate as to what contest sim you should sort by if you are using a self sim. And I'm kind of on the side of using the self sim risk adjusted ROI as opposed to the regular contest sim ROI. And I don't know if I'm in the majority or the minority there. But my thinking is that, what is the point of the self sim, right? Well, it's basically if, you're taking into account ownership variance, some of the plays that are, if the regular contest sim likes one play and then, you kind of get to more of those players in the pool that you build, well, then how do they grade out against each other? So I kind of like to think about it as like, hey, the contest sim helps you get lineups in like the top 1% of a contest, but then the self sim helps you differentiate from those lineups in the top 1% of a contest. So it's like, say that, the builder is like, hey, Philly's really good today, right? Not the highest team total, maybe a little bit less owned, they're pretty solid. It's like, okay, Philly stacks might help you get in the top 1%, but then from the Philly stacks, what lineups, what complementary pieces help you get into like the top 0.1 of a contest. And I think that's like where the self sim really, really like kind of shines, is taking all the Philly stacks that graded out well and then pitting them up against each other and then figuring. So in that sense, I'm a little bit more of an advocate for self sim ROI. But if you are using the regular solo shot ROI and are grading out as a top 3 sim ROIer, I would not recommend changing anything that you're doing. And you're probably doing enough right where you don't need to go and like, reinvent the wheel or do anything crazy in that sense. So in general, that's how I personally think about it, but I wouldn't recommend a change in this instance. Okay. Other than that, pretty unopinionated. One thing I noticed here, right? Using like a pretty low number of mini uniques with only 3. And, this is, again, like to match their risk tolerance, right? Like, hey, 3 feels right to me. Looking at the exposures, looking at the leverages, some people probably play the same slate and get up to like 5 or 6, but 3 is the right number for Jimmy. So all of this looks really good. Really happy with what I'm seeing. Solid stuff. Keep it up, and you will get rewarded for that sim ROI. All right. Good stuff there. Keeping it going. Next person up here is Renegade, and going to be looking at a showdown. So this will be fun. And there was a specific showdown. Let's see which one it was. Colorado and Washington. All right. So let's go to yesterday. Let's go to Colorado and Washington. All right. So starting contest tab, as always. Okay, 11 entries in the solo shot, quarter jukebox, dime time. So starting from the ground up, I think this is good. I don't know what the single entry and 3 max contest offerings look like for this small slate here. But if there are some, I would try and get to them. Like maybe this $2 single, $4 2 max. Those could be like a couple of good contests to mix in here. Even if you're only entering, one lineup in the $4, right? So like say you play the $2, you put one lineup in the 4, and that's it, right? That can still be good for balancing out your single entry and 3 max contest choices here. So consider making that small change. Let's look at the quarter jukebox since you have 20 entries there. Okay, enter in 20 lineups. Sort by sim ROI. All right, so negative 18% sim ROI. So it looks like there's some room to make some improvement here. So let's go and see what we can find. 48K salary. So this is a lot lower than all these other top sets, right? 49,000, 49.7, 49.8, 49.1. A lot of these players, their average salary is still within like 1,000 of the max, and yours is about 2,000 lower. So that's one thing I'm noticing. Also remember the size of these contests. I think it's like super easy to think you're building for NFL Showdown in MLB season, but these contests are less than 2,000 entries, right? You don't need to be so different to be good in these contests. And I think that's another thing I'm noticing here, right? Like, yes, you are playing 20 unique lineups, but the top players aren't. And I think that, this goes back to, you can build 20 unique lineups by playing lineups that just aren't very good and that other people just won't play. Or you could play lineups that have low average dupes. Maybe you have less unique, but these lineups are just overall kind of better. So I think we need to work on like finding that balance more as opposed to trying so hard to be unique. So like these top lineups with, high sim ROIs of like the 50s and 40%, right? One average dupe, two average dupes, one average dupe, two average dupe, one average dupe. We see one person with 0 average dupes, but only 13 out of 20 unique lineups, right? So these players are striking a little bit more of a balance here. Your sim average score is about 55. Some of these other sets, a little bit higher, right? I think we need to strive to be a little bit higher on average. Like, yeah, there are a couple people with lower sim average scores achieving positive sim ROI, but for the most part, most of these players, 63 sim average points, 59, 62, 60, 61, 59, 60, 58, 58, 58, and then 55, right? So quite a few players with higher. I think higher is going to help you a little bit here. So let's jump into the build and see what we can do different. Okay, using single game saber score, think that's good. Have an aggregate metric here for projection, think that's good as well. No filters. See the aggregate metric. Using a mini unique of 2. Average projection not really changing from mini unique of 1 to mini unique of 2. So I think that's fine. Lowering min salary, or I don't know if this is default, but 45,000 minimum, I think is fine. Okay, so let's see. So there is a geo mean rule here. So my own geo mean no more than 24. All right, so let's see what that ends up being. So let's just assume that the contest has 2,000 entries. We'll just round up. So let's say I start at like 10 divided by 2,000 to the power of 1 divided by 6. So that's like 41. So let's say 1 divided by 2,000 to the power of 1 divided by 6. That's like 28. Okay, so I think this geo means a little too aggressive. And I think this is why you're getting to such low salary lineups and overall lower projected score lineups. So let me pull this up on screen. Okay, so if we just go and look at the contest you're playing, of 1 divided by 1902 to the power of 1 divided by 6, which gets you 28.4. So I'm not sure exactly where the 25 number came from, but even if you're like, hey, I only want to play unique lineups, your geo mean would have been higher than even this rule has it at, which is 25. Or when I look in the rule, 24.29. So I think this is too aggressive, right? I would recommend setting this as a rule to like the lowest would be like 5 dupes. So like as a rule, because you don't have the ability to filter after the build, is I would come in here and I would do 5 divided by 1902 to the power of 1 divided by 6. And I would have used this geo mean number, 37, which I think you had that as an option, but opted for the lower choice. So something closer to this, I would have rather used this rule as opposed to that rule. Not sure why you chose that one. I'm assuming you just like wanted to make sure you were going to be unique, but I would lean on the other option here because, geo mean is a good estimate for dupes, but it's not like an end all be all. And, this is only like part of the equation, right? I think you could be doing other things to help your uniqueness. Some of it, another good aggregate metric actually for showdowns is showing your average salary. That way you get like a sense of where you are. So this could be pretty good here. And then another thing that I would recommend for showdowns is to just run a cache build, right? Open up a build, go to your settings, switch the build mode to optimizer, and then just build like the top 20 projected lineups. And, less to look at the lineups, but more to just kind of look at the most obvious trends in lineup construction. Of being unique and trying to be different from the field. So like what I would do is I'd run this build. I would go to team stacks and I would say, okay, hey, not seeing a lot of 5-1s in either direction, seeing a lot of 4-2 Washingtons and even stacks. So most popular stacks are evens or Washington 4-2s. Now what you do in your build that I like to do is, okay, I know that Washington 4-2s and 3-3s are the most popular. I'm not exactly sure why you unchecked 4-2 Colorados and 5-1 Washingtons, but I would be open to those. And the reason I'd be open to those is because we weren't really seeing them. And, just like the way I like to do it is, let the build run and then just go and see how often they're coming up in the pool. And even if it's only coming up in the pool like 5% of the time, you could probably match that number and just say, hey, I know these stacks are going to go lesser owned. I kind of want to play them closer to their optimal rate. And then those are going to be entries that you're basically saying like, hey, these are different from the field and those can help you to be more unique while still relying on sim outputs to help you get there. So that's something I would like to do. And then let's go back to the players tab. No min-max exposures at captain. For Colorado. Renegades here says, so I'm not sure if this is correct, but I summed all the contests and came up with a geo mean. Okay. So you could do this a couple different ways. So the first way you could do this would be to run 3 different builds and use a different value for each one. You could use the biggest contest and just let it have kind of a trickle down effect to the other contests. Or you could pick the contest that you care the most about, maybe the one with the highest entry fees, which would be the solo shot, and use that one. There's a couple different ways to do it. I would probably stick with one of those 3 options that I just went with. So figure out which one makes the most sense to you and works best with your process and give one of those a shot. But to summarize, so work in some of these smaller single entries. Don't be so aggressive with the geometric mean. Consider running a cash build to do a little bit of additional research for uniqueness, and then add in the average salary along with the average projection aggregate metrics. But those would be the big things that I'm looking at here, right? I think that this is a really, really solid review. I'm glad that you volunteered, because I think that, some of these things will definitely like drastically help you out to get to higher sim ROI sets. So I'm actually looking forward to hearing about how this goes for you the next time you play. But appreciate you signing up. All right. That was our last person who signed up here, got through all 4 people. So appreciate you guys tuning in. We do the show Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern. So our next review will be on Monday here. So appreciate everybody tuning in. I will see you all office hours tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern. And until then, take care. Good luck. Thanks. Bye.